Hello there and welcome to this Pandas challenge, day 30 of 30. This is the last session when it comes to our series on the Pandas library challenges. My name is Valentine and I'll be your instructor. To get first started with this challenge, you need to go to the description section of this video and click on the practice resource link that should take you to a page that looks like what you're seeing on your screen. Once you get here, just click on the sample practice workbook and sign in, and then you can get started. All right, so starting off, once you have gotten to have accessed the sample notebook or the sample workbook, you will get to this page and you need to save a copy of this notebook by going to File, then save a copy in Drive to have a copy of your notebook. I'll be using the practice notebook, which is similar to the sample notebook. The only difference is that there are more challenges in the practice notebook, and we usually give this notebook to afterwork members. Okay, so once you have saved a copy, the first thing that you need to do is to connect by clicking on the button that's on the top right, just connect. That will connect our notebook to Google servers. That's where we're going to be running our code. And once we have done that, we can go through now the prerequisite section. So expanding that, the first thing that when it comes to working with pandas that we do is to import the library itself, and that we do by running this code. So we would write this code, import pandas spd, then we run it to just import the library and be able to use its functions. Okay, so the first concept is named aggregation with specific columns. So in certain cases, we might want to create a summary table, but again, we would want to rename the columns of the summary table. That's the pivot table. We can be able to define the names of the already existing columns that we want in that summary table. And we can do that in multiple steps, but using named aggregations is one of those techniques that we can perform in order to be able to name our column. So for instance, if we have this data set that contains information about internet usage, so you can see here, we might want to create a summary table that has gender column, as well as the time spent, total visited pages, but now in terms of the total sum of all the time spent by all users. So we could have gender, then we have total time spent, pages visited, downloads and uploads, but now the sum of all those figures. So first thing that we do to create a pivot table, we would need to group the data by a column that we're interested in, which is gender. And then we would use the aggregate function and pass a dictionary that contains the definition for the columns that we want, as well as the operations, the aggregate operations. So for example, for gender, we would want to calculate the total time spent, and we want the sum of the total time spent. So we set the total time spent as the new column name that we want, but it would contain the sum of the time spent in hours. We do the same thing for total pages visited. It would contain the sum of the pages visited. The same case with the downloads, total downloads. It would contain the sum of all downloads, and lastly, uploads. And then we apply reset index to have a pandas data frame that we can work with later easily, and we can display the aggregated data frame as shown. Right, so yeah, so that's what we have, and we can use this for maybe further analysis, maybe creating plots, or even just answering research questions. Pause the video and then work on the challenge. Moving on, in some situations, we might want to apply a function across some rows that we would want to say work with if we have a data set. So assuming that this is our data set that contains information about call records, we might want to create a custom function that applies or performs a technique. So it calculates the column duration value times column cost value. So it would calculate both of them. It would do a product of both values and then return that. And we can then create a new column called total cost to be able to have or to hold that particular new value that we've created. So yeah, to be able to perform, this technique of applying a function along a column or an axis, which is when we set axis to 1, we would refer to rows. We want to apply the function to all the rows. Then we just use the apply function and a custom function, which we apply to it. And then we set now a new column name as shown. And you can display the output. All right, pause the video and then work on the challenge. In some other situations, we might want to work with multiple custom functions and apply those custom functions to a Pandas data frame. So the first thing that we would need to do once we have loaded our data set, and again, this contains just information about call records, we would define those custom functions. We have filter outgoing calls and calculate total cost function. The first one just calculates, it just performs filtering, and the second one just creates it performs a group by, so it creates a pivot table, but again, technically it calculates the total cost for each caller number. So to apply both of those functions to the data frame, we use the pipe function, and inside that function we specify as an input or the argument, we pass the custom function that we've created. So the first one that we want to apply is filter outgoing. The second one is calculate total cost. All right, pause the video and then work on the challenge. Let me run this so that you're able to see the output. All right, moving on. In some situations, we might want to work with time series data and use that to answer research questions. And while we are working with such data, we would need to, maybe in certain circumstances, convert the date to have a time zone that works for us. Maybe data was collected using, by default, the UTC time zone. Then what we would do initially, so once we have loaded this data set, for instance, which again contains information about just call records, we would want to convert the variable that we have an interest in, that's the call date time column, to have a date time format. Then once we have done that, so we do that here, we're using the toDate time format, toDate time function. Once we have performed that conversion, then we can localize that date, that column, the date information in that column, using TZ localize. So this just sets the initial time zone, which is in UTC, and then we can convert that to a respective or an appropriate time zone by using TZ convert. Here we're just assuming that this is our appropriate time zone, and then we preview the output. As you can see here, this is -4, so you can see what we have here. All right, pause the video and then work on the challenge. In some other situations, when we are working with data, we might want to perform data type conversion. So converting the existing data into an appropriate format. And we can do so efficiently using the asType function. And we can pass a list to that function, a list that contains multiple columns, to be able to efficiently perform the data type conversion that we want. That makes our work easier. So for example, if caller number and receiver ID and call cost, as you can see here, they're all they're all in numerical. They all have numerical data types. If you want to convert them to have a string data type so that they store textual information, we can define those columns in a list, then pass it to the askType function. And again, here we're just specifying the same columns. Not we actually don't pass them to the askType function. We pass the string to the askType function, but again, the askType function, we apply it to all the columns that we want to apply that conversion to. And we replace the original columns values with an already converted ones, and we display that. All right, pause the video and then work on the challenge. In some other cases, we might want to perform string operations, so apply string techniques. So if we have this data set that contains information about, again, call records, we might want possibly to convert maybe caller number to lowercase, or maybe call type. This actually call type to lowercase is what makes sense, because caller number wouldn't necessarily make sense because it's just values that we see here. So if I change this to call type, I also change call type, we should be able to see now our output here, which is in now lowercase. So simply what we have done here is just we've created a custom function, and we give that custom function some text that comes from a Pandas data frame, and it's converted to lowercase, and then we apply convert to lowercase to the call type column. Pause the video and then work on the challenge. Again, still while working with the apply function or apply method, we can create a custom function that performs some sort of conditional logic. So in our case, assuming again that we have this data set, we would say that yes, this contains call records information. We might want to go through all the values for a particular column, say for example, this particular column, and want to check for the value, whether it's greater than maybe a certain value. If it is, then we would create a new column and create a new value for that. So for example, if the new column we want to create is usage label, which will have high or low dosage values, we can then define a custom function to determine that particular value by having some conditional logic inside it, using an if statement where we check for if the current row current row's call duration means value is greater than 10. If it is, then we return high usage. If it's not, then it's low usage, and we just set we pass that custom function to the apply method, and we set the axis to 1 to specify that we want to apply the function row-wise, and we display the output at the end. And you can see at the far end, usage label. All right, pause the video and then work on the challenge. Moving on, in some situations, we might want to determine the number of unique items that we have in a particular column. So for example, if you wanted to answer a research question that asks about how many different call types were there, we can perform a technique that allows us to determine how many of the unique values are there within the call type for column. So that technique would be actually using just the nUnique function. We apply it to the call type column, and that gives us just the unique values. I think we've covered this in the previous challenge, day 29. All right, pause the video and then work on the challenge. Moving on, when we are creating summary tables or pivot table, we might want to perform multiple aggregate operations. So if maybe in a situation where we have this data set, which again contains call records, we might want to create a summary table or pivot table that contains location as well as maybe call duration minutes. That's the mean, median, and standard deviation for that particular location. The same case with call cost, as well as call date. So in order to perform that particular operation, we just use an aggregate function and pass a dictionary as shown over here. And inside that dictionary, we specify the column we want to work with, and then the functions as values that for that key value that we want to work with. And yeah, we get our group data. All right. Lastly, filtering grouping data using group by. I think this we've already covered, but sometimes we might want to filter for data that we have already grouped. So in our case, if we had the call records data set and wanted to filter for data that we've already grouped by location, so this we group the data by location, and we can then use the filter function, and we pass to it a lambda function, which is just a function that just usually written in a single line that would perform in this case. It would check for whether the current call duration mean for a particular location is greater than 15, and it would give us the records or the groups that have call duration mean greater than 15. Actually, it would give us the records for that that belong to that group, not the group itself. All right, pause the video and then work on the challenge. So that's it. So that's it with regards to this Pandas library challenge. We hope that you are able to practice a lot and be more confident. Right now, you can be able to craft solutions when it comes to data analysis work. You can write or prepare data for analysis. That's either for visualization or just creation of data analytics reports. The next thing that we would recommend is looking at the data visualization track, learning path, and being able to practice and see how you can also get better at visualizing data, and working towards equipping yourselves with data related skills, such as this is important for the modern professional for various reasons. But again, we've provided all the resources that you need, and they are available at your disposal. If you did love this learning experience, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. And if you'd want to be informed when we post such future learning experiences, be sure to subscribe. All the best in your learning journey, and see you in the next challenge. Bye-bye.